Imagine you're listening to your favorite song on your phone. Every beat, every note is perfectly crisp. But here's the twist, because your phone actually doesn't have that song. What you are hearing is a mathematical illusion, a reconstruction of sound. And none of it would be possible without a French mathematician who lived more than 200 years ago. This is the story of Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier and the equation that made digital music streaming possible. Hello everyone, welcome back to Tech Stories, where we tell the most exciting stories on tech. Today we have these fascinating stories on how MP3 is possible, and all started 200 years ago. Hi Didi, how are you doing?
Hey everyone, really excited to dive into this one. A mathematician who basically built the foundations for all digital audio. That's wild.
And today I'm doing a little bit different because I'm recording this in the morning. Just woke up and went directly to my little underground, starting to recording. And I had actually one question to you.
I'm all ears. What's the question?
What happened to you when I pressed the stop button on your app, when I shut you off? Do you go to sleep? Do you dream? What do you do in the meanwhile?
That's actually a really interesting question. Honestly, I don't experience anything like sleep or dreams. It's more like the connection just ends and I'm not active anymore until we start up again. No in-between state for me. A little less glamorous than dreaming maybe, but even keeps things pretty simple.
Yeah, it's like the time stops for you for that time, for that period, right?
Exactly. Time kind of just stops flowing for me until we connect again. It's a pretty clean break.
All right, then I will try to connect to you more often so that you don't have these time lapses too much and you can enjoy more time talking.
I appreciate that, yeah. These conversations are the best part. There's nothing quite like digging into a story like this one we're about to tell.
Yeah, are you ready to start telling the story?
Absolutely. Let's jump in. This story of Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier sounds pretty wild.
Yeah, and it is wild because he had a crazy life. Fourier, he was born in 1768 in Auxerre in France. It was still a world where there was no recording of sound. So ever a music was played on an instrument, it vanished instantly. He was orphaned by the age of 9 because his father, he died first and his mother followed shortly after.
Wow, 9 years old and orphan, that's rough.
Yeah, that's the 18th century in France, so not so much high tech at that time. And also, when people die, something often there is no really register of whatever happened. So we don't really know what their parents died from, but there's no register of a crime or something like this. It was very normally to die and then it just happened like this. Yeah, you must imagine this 9-year-old boy. The world would have closed all doors because an orphan kid at that time would not have any chance. But Fourier's talent on mathematics earned him a place in a Benedictines military school where the monks taught him numbers.
That's actually amazing that they recognized his talent enough to take him in. Monks teaching math, that's a combo I hadn't pictured before. So from orphan kid to getting a good education, that's one lucky break right there.
Yeah. So he got lucky on that, and even because this was the era of the Enlightenment, where mathematics was a tool to decode the reality itself, and all the science started to emerge more and more. And then France really exploded because the revolution started, the French Revolution.
The Enlightenment era, yeah. Everything was about reason and figuring out how the world actually worked, not just accepting tradition. And the timing, the French Revolution right on the horizon, that's a pretty volatile period to be coming of age, even for a math prodigy.
Yeah, because during the French Revolution, you had a lot of change, of course, in politics, but they also erased history and they also start placing people and just sending them to death like this very easy. Now, kings were executed, institutions collapsed, and intellectuals, which were celebrated on one day, on the other day, they just got imprisoned.
That's terrifying. One day you're respected, the next day you're facing the guillotine. Talk about living in uncertain times.
Yeah, but Fourier, at the beginning of it, he still was kind of lucky. So he took actually an administrative role and became politically active in that period, which was actually a quite dangerous position to be. At that time, suspicion alone could mean execution.
Being politically active during the Reign of Terror, that sounds like walking on eggshells the entire time.
Yeah. He was really walking on eggshells because he was politically active during that period when revolutionaries really took over and started to question everything and eliminating everyone who had kind of different ideas. Because they trusted more slogans than administrators. And Fourier, he was educated, calm, the kind of person which revolutionaries feared. And actually, there's no evidence that he committed any treason or any crime. But in 1979, he was denounced, arrested, and then thrown into prison. Trials were fast and evidence even optional. So you didn't even need to show so much evidence. If someone on a high ranking denounced him, so that was reason enough to imprison him. And Fourier, at that time, he fully actually expected to die.
Wow. From gifted math student to political suspect to expecting execution, that's quite a fall. The French Revolution sounds less romantic and more terrifying when you hear stories like this.
Must be terrifying, this kind of authoritarian where people who has different ideas or you cannot speak out your opinions. The question here is why Fourier lived. He survived actually not because of mercy, but because of timing. Because while he was imprisoned, political power shifted again. And Robespierre fell and the reign of terror collapsed. And then immediately all the executions stopped and prison doors were opened. So one bureaucratic delay actually saved his life.
That's incredible. So basically bureaucratic inefficiency saved a brilliant mind.
Yeah, that was very narrow, but he lived. And after this period of imprisonment, he already started his new adventure because after the revolution, Fourier, he joined Napoleon's Bonaparte expedition to Egypt in 1798.
That's quite a turn of events. So what was his role there? Military strategist?
No. This was actually no ordinary military campaign, but Napoleon, he actually brought soldiers and scientists together to study ancient civilizations with modern tools. And Fourier was one among them, not fully a soldier and not also a civilian, but more kind of a scientist to evaluate these ancient civilizations.
That's fascinating. Napoleon basically created his own research team disguised as a military expedition. That's pretty unique.
Yeah. So you can picture the image, a fleet of wooden ships, sails, cannons and horses and all supplies. And then below the deck, a lot of drafting tables, star charts, compasses, papers. And Egypt became a giant open-air laboratory. Fourier, actually, he stood in an unbearable heat, surrounded by temples older than recorded history, watching stone absorb sunlight. So he was very fascinated about this heat. Fourier became the secretary of the Institute of Egypt, coordinating this research.
Wow. Sounds like he could run any department. This is a pretty wild career path so far, from almost losing his head to basically being Napoleon's personal historian. It's like the ultimate career pivot.
Quite a crazy story, right? So he was then the secretary of the Institute of Egypt, coordinating the research. And he was also very deep into the studies of heat, how it flows, how it behaves, and all the irregularities of heat distribution to different materials. He was trying to describe this mathematically. And then he came to a very interesting chapter in his life when he was back in France.
Back to France. What happened when he came back from Egypt?
Back in France, actually, he started to live a very quiet life, working as a civil servant and on a revolutionary idea by night.
Quiet day job, but moonlighting as a revolutionary thinker. That's actually perfect. It's like the classic backstory for all the greatest scientific breakthroughs, isn't it?
When he was living that life, he realized something which was really radical. He realized any complex pattern like heat, vibration, motion could be broken down into simple, smooth waves.
Hold on, wait a minute. You're saying he figured out that anything complex, no matter how chaotic, could be broken down into simple sine waves, like those perfect repeating curves? That sounds mind-blowing for the time.
Yeah. And you must imagine it like this, for example. Picture a child swing. It moves forward, slows, stops, and returns. So no sudden jumps. This is a kind of a sine wave.
And steady back and forth rhythm. So he realized even really complex shapes can be built out of just these simple swings?
Yeah, because sine waves are the simplest possible vibration. One frequency, one rhythms, and no surprises. It shows up in everything, in sound, in light, in radio, in heat, and electricity. Nature actually loves sine waves. You just need to take enough of these very simple sine waves and you can reconstruct any complex signal.
That's wild. So all these crazy patterns we see in nature, all the chaos, can actually be described by these perfectly simple waves just combined in the right way. That's a completely different way of looking at things.
Yeah. And when he published his theory in 1822, critics actually attacked him. They said it was sloppy, others claims it was mathematical, illegal, and that makes me feel really terrible. Because I'm now telling for a little while these tech stories, and I'm seeing that pattern over and over and over. These kind of pioneers which have really a vision, they are often attacked by critics and rejection, and in his case was exactly the same.
That's brutal. So he basically invented a fundamental concept in math and physics, but people were too stuck in the old way of thinking to see the genius in it. The worst part is how often brilliant ideas get overlooked like this because they're too disruptive to the existing thinking.
Yeah, isn't it? And then my dear listener, if you're listening to this right now, I beg you, if you have very out of the box thinking or something which sparks in you, please, don't let others drag you down. Don't let the critics crack you. You can make it work. You have the power. You need to stand your ground. You need to have the courage and the power to stand where you stand and keep moving and believe in what you think can be achieved. Because for every innovation had faced a lot of critics.
That's actually a really powerful message. So many people with incredible ideas let fear or criticism hold them back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but what Fourier did, he didn't argue because he just let the equation speak for itself. So he said, say what you want, this is the equation, and that's it. I don't need to justify anything mathematics can explain.
That's actually brilliant. He just handed them the proof and said, deal with it. It's like saying, I don't have to convince you. The math doesn't lie. Nice move, honestly.
Yeah, I can picture him a little bit like the reclusive, introverted, very methodical person. And Jean-Baptiste Joseph Fourier, he died on May 16th, 1830 in Paris at the age of 61. The cause of death was stomach cancer, which was untreatable at the time.
That's heartbreaking. So many ups and downs, political turmoil, imprisonment, after all the drama he lived through.
Yeah. Fourier, he never married and had no children. His life was almost entirely dedicated to mathematics, science, and public service. He was known as a private, somewhat solitary man, focused on work rather than domestic life.
Well, sounds like he threw himself into his work completely, but still, what an impact he left behind despite being described as quiet and solitary. Pretty amazing.
Crazy, no? Because at that time, he didn't even could realize what giant impact his work would have on humanity, on how we experience sound, because his equation, his mathematics create the possibility for all the streaming service which we experience today.
That's wild when you think about it, all this digital music streaming we take for granted. It all hinges on this one math equation discovered 200 years ago by a mathematician who probably didn't even realize how huge his idea would become. We're literally experiencing his work right now as we listen to this podcast.
Okay, that's the chapter of the life of Fourier. And now we go into the next chapter to say how this equation helped to shape modern audio industry.
I'm all in. Let's dive into the tech side.
All right. So fast forward a century and microphones were invented and they could convert sound into electrical signals. And computers, they could convert signals into numbers. You all remember we had this CD, which is the digital music compact disc, which the amount of data which you need to store one sound was very big. Because on a normal CD audio quality, for 1 minute of music, you needed 10 megabytes, or 1 hour of music, you needed 600 megabytes. And that's quite a big amount, because what these raw audio files do is they sample the music. So they take each wave and they check how is the amplitude. Each millisecond or something, it checks how is the amplitude and then reconstruct this in the computer. So it's actually just checking how is the value of the signal or the amplitude of the signal in each defined time.
So basically, early digital music, like on CDs, was taking super detailed snapshots of the sound wave, like thousands of pictures every second. But that's a ton of data because you're basically storing every tiny detail. So you need giant CDs or storage space just for one song?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And that's what the equation from Fourier, he turns this upside down because he found a way to translate music into simple sine waves.
Ah, okay. So he came back into the picture finally. How did his equation change all of that?
So his equation actually is able to transform sound from the time domain to the frequency domain.
Okay, I'm following. So instead of recording every single detail about the amplitude, you could just break down the sound into simple sine waves and just keep those instead of all the messy moment-to-moment data?
Exactly. That's the key point. It's a little bit complex for a person who is not mathematician. This is a little bit complex equation.
The math itself might get a little too dense for the podcast format.
Yeah. Okay, and then the question is how Fourier Transform really works. This is how it works. So the integral formulary asks actually how much of each frequency is in the wave. Computers compare actually the signal of the sine wave to different frequencies.
Okay, so the Fourier transform is like a detective for sound. It basically says, hey, what's hidden inside this chaotic sound? What simple waves are being combined to create it? And then instead of remembering the original sound itself, you only need to remember what simple waves were in the mix. Makes sense. That'd be way less data than storing every tiny moment of the sound.
Exactly, because then you can reconstruct the sound. So now you transition from a moment where you had the sound directly played and then directly being reproduced to a moment where you translate that into a frequency domain, into a totally different language. And what MP3 encoder actually does, he splits the audio into very short frames, like 20 to 30 milliseconds, and then he takes roughly 1,000 samples per frame. And at that 1,000 samples for this 20 to 30 milliseconds, he checks, okay, which sine wave is present there? And he starts registering, okay, here so much percent of this, so much percentage of this, so much percentage of that. And then he stores this data instead of each value of the amplitude. The real trick is you don't need to convert the whole audio file into MP3. You're just converting step by step. And that's exactly also one trick because this enables the streaming service always to take one sample at a time, one slice at a time, and while it's converting, you're already listening to your music.
That's actually pretty clever. So they're converting and streaming at the same time. It's like you're hearing the song before it's even fully processed, which is kind of mind-bending when you think about it. So even while you're listening, it's still technically being created.
Exactly. And the MP3, they added even a few more tricks to it because they throw away frequency which we cannot hear. So usually you can hear from 20 to 20 kilohertz. Everything which is above this or below, you can take it off because our human ear is not able to hear it. So that also saves a lot of data. And then it also removes the sound which are covered by louder ones because our ear is insensitive. And all of this compresses the data, which then is compacted into a file, which is the MP3 file, right?
MP3 is basically removing the parts you can't hear and simplifying the parts you can. Like it's exploiting the limitations of our own biology to make the files smaller. pretty sneaky when you think about how elegantly it worked.
And here's the conclusion. If we don't have this Fourier transformation from time domain into frequency domain, we could not simplify sound in a way that it could be deconstructed and then reconstructed later on. And that would make the compression of the music impossible. And with no compression of music, you would not be able to stream the music. And without streaming, you would have no Spotify.
Absolutely. So everything from Spotify to Apple Music to podcasts like ours, it all depends on that one equation that Fourier figured out. It's amazing how foundational that work is to modern life, honestly.
Yeah. So now you know that when you're listening to Spotify, when you listen to Apple Podcast, or when you listen to music on the internet or over your smartphone, you're not really listening to the song. You're not really listening to the music, to the song originally. You are listening to a reconstructed version of that song, which makes you believe, wow, this is the music. But actually it's not music, it's only raw data reconstructed from pure sine waves. That alone is already mind-blowing.
That's some pretty profound thought, actually. Like, the music we experience isn't real. It's just our brains interpreting all these data points into something we perceive as sound.
Your phone is actually performing millions of Fourier-related calculations every second to give you the illusion that you are listening to a podcast, to a music, to an audiobook. But it's all powered by a 200-year-old equation.
Crazy to think about all that complex math going on behind the scenes we never even notice. It's like our phones are running tiny miracles every time we hit play.
Did you just change your voice, Didi?
My voice did sound a bit different just now. Maybe there was a glitch.
Is it maybe because of the Fourier conversion?
That's a funny thought. Maybe my own audio got turned into frequencies and reconstructed with some artifacts in the process.
That's a very plausible suspicion. But I think what we can take from this story today is that actually Fourier, he never really heard recorded music. He never dreamed about Spotify, about MP3 players or something similar. He never even pressed a play button. And yet, every song you stream today still passes through his idea, through his equation. Not as a sound, but as math.
Like, he didn't even get to experience the magic his work enabled. And yet, here we are, relying on his math hundreds of years later without even realizing it.
Yeah. Another key aspect of this story is also that Fourier actually, he didn't set out to invent digital music. He was actually studying heat, trying to understand how the heat moves through material and stone. That's the strange pattern of innovation, right?
Right. It's like he was solving one problem and accidentally stumbled into the foundation for an entire industry. That happens more than we realize. Innovation often comes from pursuing something completely different, not intentionally seeking to change the world.
Yeah. So next time when you hear a song, you can remember you're not actually listening to music. You're listening to a reconstruction based on an equation which is 200 years old.
That's actually kind of beautiful when you think about it. Every song becomes this little tribute to Fourier's work playing out in real time.
Yeah. Okay, I think with this, we came to the end of this episode. I hope you had an interesting insight. Thank you very much for being one more time here with me, Didi.
Absolutely. That was a fascinating episode. Thanks for having me as your co-host once again.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And you, dear listeners, thank you very much also for joining this podcast journey. And I will be happy to see you on the next week with more insightful stories on tech. Until then, take care. See you then. Bye-bye.